The event that triggered the greatest conspiracy in human history did not begin with a bang, but with a silent, automated flag in a quiet, refrigerated server room in Baltimore, Maryland. At the Space Telescope Science Institute, the operational heart of the James Webb Space Telescope, a specialized AI was performing its routine analysis of spectroscopic data from deep space objects. Its task was to sort, categorize, and flag anomalies. For years, the highest level alert, a Sigma 6, had only been triggered for theoretical data simulations. But on a Tuesday morning, the system encountered a data set from the debris cloud of FreeI/Atlas and triggered something new, something that had only existed as a protocol on paper, a Sigma 7 alert. The designation was simple and absolute, non-natural, intelligent origin, high confidence. The information moved through a firewalled, encrypted channel, bypassing the normal scientific chain of command and going directly to a pre-designated office at NASA headquarters. Within minutes, the head of NASA was on a secure video line with the National Security Advisor. An hour later, at 3:17 a.m., the secure line in the Oval Office buzzed with a tone unheard for a generation. The discovery itself was terrifyingly clear. It wasn't just a strange isotopic ratio or an unidentifiable element. The high-resolution data from the JWST revealed that a stable, super-heavy element within the fragments was emitting coherent, low-energy quantum states in a repeating, non-random sequence. It was not a natural decay. It was a broadcast. The debris was not just debris, it was a network of microscopic, self-powered transmitters. The object that had shattered was not a comet, it was a machine designed to disperse a signal-emitting dust cloud throughout our solar system. The initial reaction in the highest echelons of power was not panic in a traditional sense. It was a cold, silent, and profound dread. The world's meticulously crafted first contact protocols, which mostly dealt with receiving a distant radio signal, were instantly rendered useless. This was not a distant message, it was a physical presence. It was not an invitation, it was an intrusion. They had no data on the sender's capabilities, and most terrifyingly, they had no data on their intent. The world's leaders, in their separate, isolated bunkers, came to the same, simultaneous conclusion. They were flying completely blind in the face of the greatest existential crisis in history. The week that followed the Sigma 7 alert saw the most secretive and significant geopolitical maneuvering since the height of the Cold War. Under the public guise of an emergency G7 summit to discuss a sudden global economic downturn, a fiction created and disseminated by the world's intelligence agencies, the leaders of the core global powers and their top scientific and military advisors were secretly flown to a secure, underground facility deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland. This was the birth of the Davos Protocol, a pact forged not in boardrooms, but in a bunker designed to survive a nuclear apocalypse. The initial debate was fierce and fractured, splitting the attendees into two primary factions. The first, a smaller but vocal group, were the revelationists. They argued that this truth was too vast to be contained and that humanity had a fundamental right to know. They believed the revelation could unify the planet against a common unknown, sparking a golden age of cooperation and scientific advancement. They argued that the secret was, in itself, a greater threat than the object, as it would inevitably leak and cause a crisis of trust from which civilization would never recover. Opposing them was the larger, more pragmatic, and ultimately victorious, control faction. They painted a grim, detailed picture of the consequences of disclosure. They presented classified psychological models predicting the immediate collapse of the global economy, the shattering of every major religion leading to widespread holy wars, and a wave of mass suicides and hysteria that would make the Black Death look like a footnote. Their argument was simple and brutal: humanity was not ready. The average person, they argued, could not psychologically handle the truth that their existence was now defined by an unknown, hyper-advanced external power. To reveal the truth would be to light a match in a powder keg. After 72 hours of continuous, high-stakes debate, the control faction won. The Davos Protocol was drafted and ratified in absolute secrecy. It was a treaty with three core tenets. First, the absolute and total pooling of all intelligence and scientific data related to 3I/Atlas between all signatory nations. Second, a shared, unbreakable vow of absolute public silence, with the penalty for any national breach being immediate and total political and economic isolation. Third, the formation of a permanent, unelected, and anonymous global oversight body, codenamed the Aegis Council, with the authority to manage every aspect of the ongoing crisis. The age of sovereign nations had quietly ended, and a new, secret world government had just been born, its first and only mandate being to protect humanity from the truth. With the Aegis Council established, the greatest and most complex information control operation in history was set into motion. The plan was known as the Great Normalization, and it was built upon three distinct pillars of dissection, designed to manage the truth by burying it under the weight of manufactured reality. The first pillar was narrative control. The Council's primary objective was to make the story of 3I/Atlas as boring and scientifically mundane as possible. They commissioned and funded a wave of scientific papers, documentaries, and news articles that all reinforced the same message. It was a large, interesting, but ultimately natural comet. They used advanced CGI to create stunningly realistic but completely fictional visualizations of a natural fragmentation process, which were then distributed to media outlets worldwide. Popular science communicators and influencers were fed this official narrative, becoming unwitting agents of the cover-up as they explained the fascinating but normal science of the comet to their millions of followers. The second pillar was disinformation and division, a strategy codenamed the Hydra Initiative. The Council understood that the truth would inevitably leak in some form. To counteract this, they didn't just fight the leaks, they flooded the information ecosystem with an overwhelming amount of noise. Intelligence agencies used their vast resources to create and amplify dozens of new, completely insane conspiracy theories about the object. Bot forums pushed narratives that 3I/Atlas was a holographic projection, a harbinger of a spiritual awakening, or a chunk of ice from the flat Earth wall. The goal was to create a conspiracy fog. By making everything seem like a conspiracy, the real leaks could be dismissed as just another crazy theory, and anyone who got too close to the truth could be easily discredited by association with the most lunatic fringe. The third and final pillar was scientific suppression, codenamed the Labyrinth Project. This was the most direct and brutal aspect of the plan. The original Sigma-7 data from the JWST was placed under a level of classification usually reserved for nuclear-launched codes. Every scientist, technician, and analyst who had seen the raw data was forced to sign a lifetime, legally binding national security non-disclosure agreement, with threats not just to their careers but to their personal freedom. Funding for any independent astronomical research that sought to analyze the debris field with high-resolution instruments was mysteriously and universally cut. The Council created a new, highly funded research institute that produced a steady stream of official science that supported the natural comet narrative, creating a scientific echo chamber that drowned out any dissenting voices. The truth was not just hidden, it was actively and systematically erased from reality. For a time, the Great Normalization was a resounding success. The world, fed a diet of mundane science and distracted by a circus of wild conspiracies, moved on. But a secret of this magnitude is like a radioactive element, it has a half-life, and its decay is inevitable. The first cracks in the wall of silence came not from a government, but from an individual. A disillusioned mid-level data analyst at the European Southern Observatory, haunted by the raw spectral data he had been forced to delete, became the first whistleblower. Using a complex network of encrypted channels, he began to leak small, anonymized packets of the original data, just the isotopic ratios, without context, to a small, trusted collective of independent journalists and scientists. This was the first breadcrumb trail. The second major crack came from a glitch, an unpredictable real-world event. A microscopic fragment of the free I/Atlas debris, far smaller than predicted but still carrying the anomalous elemental signature, survived atmospheric entry. It landed not in the ocean, but in the vast, desolate landscape of the Siberian tundra. Its faint quantum signature was detected by the Aegis Council's secret monitoring systems, triggering a frantic, high-stakes recovery operation. A joint US-Russian special operations team, operating under complete secrecy, was deployed to secure the fragment. The operation was almost compromised when a commercial satellite from a non-protocol nation captured a thermal image of the non-standard aircraft and ground activity. The Council was forced into a desperate move, fabricating a cover story about a fallen Russian military satellite with a radioactive power source, allowing them to declare an official exclusion zone while they retrieved the object. This Siberian incident created a flurry of rumors and inconsistencies that the official narrative struggled to explain. Finally, there was the growing power of the amateur network. Independent astronomers and citizen scientists, pooling their resources and using shared, open-source data analysis tools, began to find subtle but persistent inconsistencies in the public data sets released by NASA and the ESA. Their findings were small, a slight wobble here, an unexplained energy signature there, but when woven together, they began to form a tapestry that directly contradicted the boring, official story of a simple comet. The wall of silence was still standing, but it was beginning to show cracks. This brings us to the ultimate question at the heart of this global conspiracy. Was the Davos Protocol, this great normalization, the most profound and unforgivable betrayal in the history of our species, or was it a necessary, even heroic, act of salvation? We must examine the noble lie, the argument that the leaders of the Aegis Council would make to justify their actions. They would argue that they did not betray humanity, they protected it from itself. They would present models showing the 99% probability of immediate societal collapse upon revealing the truth, the shattering of faith, the holy wars, the market crashes, the anarchy. They would argue that they chose order over chaos, survival over a truth that would have destroyed us. They carry the terrible burden of this knowledge so that billions of others can continue to live their lives in peace, to raise their children, and to believe they are the masters of their own destiny. In their view, they are the silent guardians of a fragile civilization, making an impossible choice to prevent our self-destruction. But there is another, far darker perspective. The argument that this was the single greatest act of totalitarianism ever conceived. It was a betrayal that denied every human being on the planet their agency, their right to face reality, and their chance to evolve as a species. It infantilized humanity, treating the populace as children who couldn't be trusted with the truth. More insidiously, it placed unimaginable, unaccountable power into the hands of a secret, unelected cabal. This council now holds the single greatest secret in history, and with it, the potential to control the future. Are they truly working to protect humanity, or are they secretly trying to reverse engineer the technology from the Siberian fragment to consolidate their own power? The noble lie is a seductive justification for ultimate control. And so, the final choice is left to us. If you were in that room, presented with the absolute proof of an alien intelligence and a near certainty of global chaos if you revealed it, what would you have done? Would you tell the truth and risk the end of the world as we know it? Or would you bear the weight of the greatest lie ever told?